Hi, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. and today I'm reviewing Castle Party from Devere Games. And Castle Party is a Polyomino flip and write game in which you'll be flipping out different shapes. More specifically, you'll be flipping out Polyomino shapes, at which point the players will take turns building out their own little monster Polyomino to fill them into the castle, the little ball that they're having, the party that they're having in their castle, all in an effort to score as many points as efficiently as possible before the game runs out. Now, the basic idea, I said already, is on your turn, you're going to flip one of these cards, and then players will take turns looking at their hand of cards and playing down monsters into that general shape. So maybe I go ahead and I play the vampire to the X as my starting shape. Now other players can go ahead and follow from it. I'll draw another card. Other players will grab a card and they'll go ahead and play this. You know what? They'll grab this, placing it over here, trying to get two of those X's together. I'll go ahead and grab one of these cards and I am going to go ahead and put just a circle down here, and then he'll take another X and place it down over here. So you're building out the Polyomino shapes, starting with the X spot on the board, and then building out the shape, and then every player will take their little marker and draw the shape in their castle, keeping the relative orientation. So for example, on this player board over here, I can grab this orientation over here, draw these two X's next to the window over here, those little skeletons over there, and then put the vampire down here, drawing the shape, and then finally the little over there. There we go. I drew it on my board. Now on somebody else's board, they'll draw the same thing, but they'll have the same relative orientation. So someone else was over here will have to draw it using that relative orientation to the table. So you're drawing it out over there, putting your own shapes on your own boards. So you'll end up with slightly different configurations to your castle. Very slightly though, because ultimately the castle is a square. So not a lot matters except for the drawbridge, which can have a small effect there. From there, you're trying to basically create groups of monsters. You're going to go ahead, continue with the next player, drawing another Polyomino shape tile, placing it out on the board, and then continuing from there until eventually you get to a clock which will trigger a mid-game scoring, and then eventually you'll run out of everything and get to the end of the game. That's the basic idea. You're trying to fill in your castle, building out your unique Polyomino shapes, putting those into your castle in order to score points. There's a few other things to be mindful of. For example, you have 3 one-time use abilities that will let you modify how things go into the game. You have masking a dinosaur, masking a monster, where you can choose to draw it as a separate monster for yourself. You have lights out where you can reorient the actual monsters in that pattern, that Polyomino shape, and then you have the rotation where you can swap the rotation of the Polyomino, and both of those two actions will affect all players. Those are 3 one-time use abilities that will score you points at the end of the game if you don't use them, but if you do use them, will modify and make it a little easier to get what you want out of those Polyomino shapes as you slowly start building out these Polyomino trials, trying to get your shapes on the board. Now past that, you're also going to have the 3 intermediate scorings. Like I said already, there's 3 clocks in the stack over here, and as those clocks are revealed, you're going to reveal intermediate scorings, and one at a time you'll have to choose different intermediate scorings, whether they are having the largest group of monsters, whether they're having a group of monsters around the Pumpkin King. You're going to draw a Pumpkin King who's going to reward you for being next to adjacent monsters, or whether you want to have a fireworks display where you want to have as many monsters next to the windows as possible. So those are 3 intermediate scorings. When those clocks come out, each player can choose a different scoring that will affect their score at the end of the game as they go through how to optimize around that. And then lastly, at the end of the game, you're going to score points for your group of monsters. You'll lose points for any monsters that are in the water over there because you can draw Polyomino shapes such that they extend off the edge of the board. That is totally legal, but will result in you losing points, but might help you get more points that make it worth it. Polyomino shapes that extend onto your drawbridge, on the other hand, those will not gain you points, but nor will they lose you points either. They're waiting outside, trying to get into the party. They haven't gotten access just yet. From there, at the end of the game, you'll score points for your largest group of every type of monster. Each monster within its largest group will score points, so these X's over here will score points. These X's down over here in the corner will not score points. And additionally, each monster type has a king, a special monster type that will reward you. If it's in your group, it'll score additional points for being around the different monsters. And that's basically Castle Party. You're flipping over Polyomino shapes, you're building out the Polyomino shapes with your monsters, you're trying to optimize how to go through both the mid-game scoring, how to take advantage of your abilities, how to stack your monsters together in ways that will have the largest grouping of each of the types of monsters, and then hopefully getting your kings and queens and putting them in their spot so that they can multiply your scoring, getting an extra 3, 4, maybe 5 or 6 points if they're in a large enough grouping surrounded by all sides. Rinse and repeat until the game ends, and that is Castle Party in a nutshell. As far as my review of this game, as far as things, starting off with ease of play, rules are quick and easy, very short rule book. I mean, you got like a few pages over here, not a lot going on as far as the rules. I would say the rules themselves are fairly easy, fairly intuitive, easy to play, easy to teach. I don't love the fact that you do have to reference the rules, both for your abilities and for your endgame scoring or mid-game scoring as well. There's a small amount of information could have been printed on a player rate, a player card. I recently just reviewed Luna Capital from Devere Games as well, and it had the same problem where some things were in the rules that I would have loved to see on a player aid. Not a lot of information to remember, but it could have easily been in some way taught or accessible in some way, shape, or form that makes it a little less checking the rulebook and a little more, hey, it's printed on my board or printed on some sort of player aid card. Past that, table space is very minimal, game time is fairly minimal, it comes in around 20-30 minutes for the game, so mostly accessible. With the, as far as ease of play, mostly checks all the boxes, with the small exception of some player aid things which I would have loved to see a little bit more, well, obvious as opposed to in the rulebook. As far as player count, this is a 2 to 4 player game. I've only played it at 2 and 3 players. I can't imagine it gets much worse at 4 or much different at 4. You're going to have a little more interaction in terms of building out the polyomino, so on those larger shapes, maybe you get only one attempt to build it as opposed to multiple, so you have a little bit less control, but not enough that would necessarily impact the game. 2 and 3 were both fine. I imagine 4 would be as well. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking. Beginning with what I like, and that's the fact that this is a polyomino flip and write game. I enjoy polyomino games. I enjoy roll and writes, flip and writes, that general genre. I enjoy building out my little shapes, and this does check a lot of those key boxes. And just in general, you're building out shapes, you're trying to structure your polyominoes, you're trying to place them in ways that are optimal, you're building out different patterns and trying to take into account how to build it out. And your second and third game will be different than your first as you start to realize how you're boxing yourself into a corner through the ways you're building them out. As you become more familiar with the shapes, more familiar with the way the polyominoes will be built by the players, you get a little more familiar with the game and you will learn and iterate upon that. And the variable scoring drives your choices. You can't have everything in this game. You're going to be trying to get, well, points for the criteria, points for the mid-game scoring, and then points for your general largest groupings of monsters. And you won't be able to have it all. It's just not something that's going to happen. You're going to have to make choices, what you want to score, how you want to score. It's got that typical, just everything's going to be trying to give you a criteria to go for, and you want to choose how and where to place your polyominoes to maximize your scorings. And those one-time use abilities in the game will let you manipulate and change things the one time that is particularly beneficial, or 3 times more specifically, because there are 3 abilities. And you'll have to choose when to use it. When is rotating a polyomino shape going to really help you lock in multiple larger scoring opportunities, because they're worth points on their own if you don't use them, but used at the right time and place, they can be worth significantly more points in the game. As far as what I don't like in the game, there's not a lot to actively dislike about Castle Party. It checks its boxes as far as what it does. I would say more in this category is just the fact that, in general, this genre of roll and write games, of polyomino games, it's a crowded genre to begin with. And the main mechanic that stands out for Castle Party, the main thing that makes it different compared to other games in the genre, is the group building of your polyomino shapes. And I don't know if, in and of itself, that's enough to stand out in a crowded space full of great games. So it's really not that there's anything that I actively dislike about Castle Party, but more that I don't know if it does enough to necessarily stand out as being something that, you know, has that, oh, you have to try that one, it captures your attention in some special magical way. It does polyominoes, it does roll and write, it does flip and write, it checks all the boxes, and that's kind of where it ends there. As far as what I can see others not liking about the game, the orientation aspect can be a bit confusing and unnecessarily so. Just the fact that you have this rotating aspect that's like, oh, everyone puts it into the castle in a way that matches the rotation. I mean, sure, you can do that, it just feels unnecessary because anyway, it's a square, it's a grid, you're all starting with the same basic framework, and where you put your polyominoes doesn't really change based on the orientation past that moat. Small little tedious unnecessariness. Past that, you have to be comfortable with the fact that a lot of what you put down in your castle will not score you points. As you build out your castle, as you get more and more down there, you will find that you're just not able to score points for everything. You'll have groupings of X's over here, and then because of the way things happen, you'll have groups of X's here and here and here. Your castle is going to score for maybe half of what you put in there, maybe 2/3 if you're really optimal about things, but a lot of the monsters that show up will inherently just not be adjacent to their largest group and just won't score you points, and that might just feel like you're building a lot of stuff and only some of what you're building is scoring you points. As far as final thoughts on Castle Party, I kind of touched upon this already and what I don't like, but Castle Party is a fine game. But that's kind of where it ends for me. It's a fine game. I enjoyed playing this. This is fun. The cute artwork is adorable. This stands out. This is very accessible. Great for kids in that sense because it just pulls you in with the aesthetic of the game, and the rules are simple enough and accessible enough, and playing it is fun. But like I said already, I don't know if it stands out in a crowded sphere. Roll and writes are a dime a dozen right now, and that means that to be a roll and write that is worthy of paying attention, to be a roll and write that I recommend, you have to be doing something that is more than just fine. Castle Party is totally fine. If this is your first introduction to a roll and write game, you'll have a lot of fun with it. I think you will. This is an enjoyable experience. But it also doesn't stand out at the same time. It's a 3 out of 5 for me. A fine experience, one that I'm totally fine playing, and I use the word fine like 14 times in the past few minutes because that's what it is. it's fine, but it also doesn't stand out for me. I think this is one that will be forgettable over the course of time. It's got cute artwork and simple and reliable gameplay, but at the end of the day, it's fine. Until next time, I am Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, have a good one.